Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for making the time out to join us at this month's masterclass. For those who don't know, masterclasses are run by IAB MENA, and we ask our members to come forward and present information that we believe is useful and interesting for the overall marketplace, not just for our members, but for everybody, actually. And I think these are fantastic sessions to really take a step back and to learn something new about the marketplace. None of these sessions are sales-led. None of these are about, taking the opportunity to present any solutions or sales that people can buy. This is not a buying opportunity. It's really an opportunity to learn something new about the market. We've had some really interesting ones to date, and we've got a few interesting ones planned, but I'm personally quite excited about this one, which focuses on SMB, or small businesses are big business. It's an area that I think many companies have tried to leverage over the past, some successfully, some not so successfully, but it accounts for a large portion of the overall market, particularly in MENA. And what we're going to see from the guys today is some insights into this market and some potential solutions. These sessions are your sessions, so it's really an opportunity for you to ask questions, to raise debate, to have discussions. We always make sure that it's not a one-way street, so please feel free at any time to stop and have a question or have a chat. Don't derail the presentation, obviously, but do take some time to learn from the experience as well and to share with those that are on the call. We do record these sessions, as you will know from the introduction, and these are available should you wish to share these with colleagues after the session as well. You can watch some of the previous masterclasses by going to our YouTube channel, and you can watch out for some of the masterclasses that are coming up over the course of the next couple of weeks as well. We've got one session in 2 weeks' time on attention, where IAS and Tailwind will be talking through the state of attention within the MENA marketplace. And then November, we've got 2 sessions actually on search, one about search today and how to really leverage that opportunity as a marketing tool, and actually a follow-up as to what do we think is going to happen with search going forward. What's the future of search, particularly with developments around AI? So lots of exciting masterclasses coming up over the course of the next few months as well. But I think that's enough about the future. Let's talk a little bit about today. We've got the team from Netizency with us today, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. But over to you, Fadi, your session.
Great. Thank you for having us, Ian. We're excited to be here. So I'll just start off with a quick introduction. This session will be hosted by Guy Murphy and myself. Guy Murphy was formerly the Global Chief Strategy Officer at J. Walter Thompson, previously Deputy Chairman at BBH. And I've worked at numerous ad agencies, management consultancies, and telcos prior to starting a social media agency. But briefly, Guy and I came together. We were introduced during times of COVID, actually, early COVID, over a Zoom call. And we kept on having a Zoom call for an hour every week for 2 years. And we were discussing the state of the industry. And after 2 years, we decided to kind of put our effort and money where our mouth is, and we decided to do something about it. So the purpose of this presentation is to share with you what we've learned over the past 3 years in 30 minutes and have a discussion about it together. So in summary, there's been an arrival in a new technology in our industry, and this technology has kind of eclipsed a lot of the experience and expertise that we've all gathered and built over the years. So with the bad things that this technology brought, it also brought together a very interesting opportunity, an opportunity to access the biggest untapped advertising market in the world, which is what we want to walk you through. So let's take a look at this from a top-down perspective. The rule of thumb on marketing, or the minimum marketing spend the company should have, is 5% of sales. I think we've all heard this, read this somewhere. It starts at 5%. They say you need 5% to maintain your current revenue, 5 to 10 if you want to continue to grow, 15 to 20 if you want to grow at a faster pace, 2 to 5% B2B, or 5 to 10% B2C. The 5% has always been there in every marketing spend research that we've all come across. Now, if we are to look at this from a global perspective, let's look at global GDP. Global GDP is sales or revenue of the world. So if we look at the total number of sales globally, that's $109 trillion. And this is the forecast for 2024. And then we compare that with the forecast ad spend for 2024, that's $1 trillion. So the actual percentage of sales that's being spent globally on advertising is 1%. And we can compare that. It's 1% if you look at global GDP. It's 1.5% if you look at the US ad spend versus GDP, or it's 0.4% if you look at MENA GDP versus ad spend. So our region significantly lags behind in terms of percentage ad spend out of GDP or out of total sales. But this is not the point of this presentation. This is just to give you a bit of context. I think the point of this presentation is, what about the other 80%? So the difference between the 5% that should be spent, or the minimum spent on marketing, and the 1% being spent globally is lost somewhere. And we want to understand, where is this 4% gone? So this 4% can be due to one of two reasons. Either companies that are spending on advertising are spending less than 5%, which there's some underspend happening, or there are a lot of companies who are not spending at all on advertising. So let's look at those two separately. If we look at the less than 5%, so those are companies in the market, they're currently spenders. Are they spending less than 5%? And ad industry bodies, whether it's the Marketing Society or the IAA or the IAB, usually help those entities to spend more or push them to drive more. They help businesses that advertise to advertise more by promoting the value of having more advertising. I think one example is during COVID, all of the industry bodies pushed towards, you need to keep spending, and companies that keep spending during COVID will come out on top. Which is great. And I think it's definitely great to help bigger companies or companies spending on advertising to spend more. But if the industry is looking on the left-hand side, who's looking on the right? What about the 0%? Who are the people who are not advertising? And what is happening with those people? I think the short answer is nothing. And let's look at this a little bit more. Who are those people? Who are those people who are not spending? We understand that some businesses don't need to advertise. If you're in a wholesale commodity business, or you have one specific client that you do everything for, then you don't need to be spending on advertising. But there are a lot of other companies that need to be. So who are those non-spenders that are not being pushed or nudged or serviced? And the answer is, it's those guys. These are not a hidden audience. They're the people you encounter in your everyday life. You probably bought your coffee from one of them in the morning. They tailored your suit, they made your hair, they cooked your lunch, they put together a bouquet of flowers for your spouse, they fixed your sink, they filed your taxes, they delivered your groceries, they even gave you a massage probably. Those are small businesses. Those are entrepreneurs. Those are companies. I'm not talking SMEs in the Dubai standard. In Dubai, I think an SME is a company that makes $5 million or above. I'm talking about a hairdresser or a florist, or very small companies that are between 0 and 10 employees. Those are not hidden in plain, they're basically hidden in plain sight. They're staring in the face, and they need advertising. Do any of you service those guys? Based on, well, Guy and my entire career in advertising, I don't think any of the agencies we've worked with ever could work with any of those small businesses. I assume that you'd think that they're small, right? It's not a relevant audience, but they actually make up 95% of all businesses. Okay, yes, they make up 95% of all businesses, but their value is very low. Well, not really, because they make up 55% of GDP. So combined, their power is extremely big. And if we are to kind of value this opportunity, we do realize that this is the largest untapped audience or opportunity in advertising. And I'll put this into a little bit of context. There are 333 million SMEs globally. However, there are 10 million ad accounts on Meta and 20 million ad accounts on Google. So almost 90% of those people don't even have an ad account on digital. So obviously, this is a very, very clear indication that they're not advertising. I'll let Guy take you through a little bit more about this audience and their struggles.
Okay, thank you, Fadi. Can I check you can see the right screen there?
Yep.
Perfect. So to continue the narrative then, if small businesses are not advertising and they're significant and important to the economy and to the ad industry, let's take a moment to understand why they're not advertising, and then see if we can get to some kind of solution to that. So we're going to start by just taking a step back from a narrow focus on advertising, and let's look at how a small business would promote themselves more generally. So this is a typical small business marketing footprint, and this is based on literally hundreds of hours of research and conversation that we've done with small business owners, sole traders, startup founders, entrepreneurs, lots of different people. And although it varies by category, this is roughly the average. So on the left-hand side, there's still some people doing traditional advertising, putting ads in local papers or putting leaflets through doors. That still exists for some categories. There's a general recognition that everyone needs a website, but not everyone does. Most do. Quite often created by a friend of a friend who's got a mate who's a developer. Then the bars start to go down. So there's some organic social. Again, that depends on the category as to how much they're doing. But quite often the organic social is done by the most junior person in the company because they get social, don't they? Or it's somebody's niece who's got a successful TikTok account gets asked to do the organic social as a favor. And then the bars drop off. There's a little bit of pay-per-click that often comes bundled with the development of the website that lasts a couple of months. But when that runs out, small businesses don't really know how to renew that and get that going again. And then as been mentioned, there's a small slither of paid ads, but negligible. So I guess the key point here is this drop-off, which we're calling this crisis of confidence. Just before you move to paid, people don't feel confident in what they're doing. So let's have a look at what that crisis is about. What's making people feel like that? And there's three bits we've discovered from talking to people. There's a particular point about expertise, about time, and then about affordability. Regarding expertise, we've got to remember that the people we're talking about are expert in their domain. You know, if they're a dentist, they know a lot about teeth, but they don't know much about marketing. And you wouldn't expect them to either, would you? If you're a lawyer, you're excellent at understanding how to do divorce and wills and probate, but you don't know much about advertising, and why would you? And remember, these businesses don't have marketing departments either, so you can't shift to someone who's an expert in it elsewhere. They don't have the time to work it out. They often think, well, I'll just go and learn it. I'm a small business entrepreneur. I'm resourceful. I can go and learn this stuff. And as we know, you start Googling how to do digital advertising, and it's a morass of difficult information. And then they think, well, let me go and try and get a freelancer or an advertising agency to help me. And then the price tag is too great, especially with agencies. With freelancers, it tends to be less expensive, but quite unsatisfactory experiences of people dropping in and out. So people get left feeling like, I'm just not confident enough to do this, and I can't afford anyone else to help me work it out. So what do we do to help this crisis of confidence? Because there's a lot to solve here. And the answer in part is automation. You know, the service of providing digital advertising needs to be automated. And if it's done properly, it can overcome this crisis of confidence. It can have the expertise built into it, not needed by the advertiser. And it, of course, can work at speed and at much less cost because it's not trying to do it using people. Now, you could quite understandably say, but Guy, there is automated advertising already, isn't there? Isn't that what the platforms are doing and various others? And of course, you're partly right, but it's not the automation that we think is right for what we're describing here for small businesses. This is a screenshot of the ad manager, of course, but you could take any screenshot of any of the ad managers or campaign managers, and they all look a little bit like this. And this is what automated advertising looks like right now. And we don't think this is appropriate for the kind of people that we're talking about, because it assumes they have some expertise. Otherwise, why would there be so much jargon on these pages? Why are there so many difficult concepts to understand? Why have they made it difficult to navigate? You know, why are they asking a baker, someone who owns a bakery, whether they should have Advantage Plus targeting or manual targeting? I mean, they might be good at baking the croissants, but they're not going to answer that question very easily. So yes, there is a degree of automation, but it assumes far too much knowledge and experience for small business to be able to navigate this. And we've had lots of conversations with LinkedIn and Twitter and Meta, and they talk a lot about there being dormant accounts. And that's when, you know, small business people have gone to these ad managers, they've taken one look at the pages, having set up their account, and just run away, and they never come back. So there are thousands of dormant ad accounts being used where people have gone to the automated process and thought, no, I can't do this. So what kind of automation is needed then? Well, let's build some steps to this. So I think our first point will be to stop asking so many questions. I mean, there appears to be a kind of default mindset or culture when creating these self-serve platforms that the user has to give a huge amount of input for things to work. For the machine to create the right output, we need a bunch of questions from the user to be answered. So it needs the prompts before anything can happen. Which, by the way, is quite similar to the culture in advertising agencies, isn't it? Where, you know, you spend hours asking the client questions and filling out briefing forms with questions, and then there are questions about questions with clients. It's an industry of questions, isn't it, that need to be answered first. And the trouble with that is it puts the pressure on the user to have answers, which, as we've seen, they don't. So what we think is right is to shift the culture or shift the default answer to give answers, not ask questions. And you might quite rightly ask, but how can you possibly give the right advertising answers for small businesses if you haven't found out much about them first? How can you know what's right for them unless you've asked them a bunch of questions to make sure it works? Because you can't just guess, and of course not. And we feel that actually there is so much experience and knowledge amongst the people in the advertising industry and in the body of knowledge of the advertising industry that actually makes us all extremely well informed already about what a business might need. So let's play a short game here. I don't know how many years experience all of you have had in the industry, if you are in, but I imagine you all have a reasonable amount of industry. You've all seen lots of different clients, lots of different categories. You've read, you've learned stuff. And let's ask the question then, what do you think is the smallest number of questions you would need to ask a potential small business client before you thought you could give them a pretty decent advertising recommendation? So let's make that tangible quickly. Let's take a small business, let's say a hairdresser in downtown Dubai. Take that in your heads. Just think for a moment, I've got to provide an advertising recommendation for them. What is the smallest number of questions I would think I might need to be able to do the ads? And I don't know if we can throw that into your answers. Just stick a number into the chat.
We've gotten 2 answers so far. There's been a 1 and a 3.
A 1 and a 3. This is impressive. 1 and 3. Any more?
4, 5, and 2.
Okay. Isn't that interesting that I suspect the people who gave those answers probably ask a lot more questions than that in their day job. But here talking, I think they're giving the right kind of level of answers. Like, you don't need to ask a lot of questions. I mean, Fadi and I have got it down to 2. We think there's 2 questions that you need to ask that we wouldn't be able to know or find out. But from those 2 answers, we can create full recommendations. But it is about shifting from questions to answers. And the reason why we got the answers, which we've hinted at before, is that there have been so many academic studies that are very robust. Thousands of case histories. The studies have all been replicated across geography, across categories, across time, across life stage of companies. And there are an awful lot of generic answers that you can apply to any category and any business. I mean, I'm not going to repeat them all now, but just so you know the kind of things we mean. You know, every single category has 2 different kinds of buyers in it. Buyers who are buying now and buyers who are buying later. So in market now or in market later. And that's true. And the number of people who are buying now is small. The number of people who are buying later is big in the market. And you need 2 different kinds of advertising to be able to appeal to those 2 different kinds of buyers. And we know that the executions need to be different. If you're targeting people who are buying later, then it's about building executions that can build memory structures. So you need a sense of kind of emotion in the advertising. It needs to be very well branded. It needs to have a strong association with the category to make it easy to come to mind when they do want to buy. So, I mean, you know all this. We all know all this. But you can actually put it to work quite directly on businesses in categories because you know the kind of answers that you need. So if we were to build the right kind of automated solution, it would begin to look like this, where you start with your expertise, which means the front end can be almost no questions at all and extremely simple in its experience. And it's the back end that you can put the answers, the solutions that we know we can come to. The strategic answers and the executional guidelines come from the ad science. And of course, the actual creative components can come from the generative technology and the other creative design services that you can connect to. And we'll show you some examples of what that could look like in a second. But the basic principle is you can have an automated self-serve solution that does not need to look like the current ad managers. And that's how it can help create what we believe is a change in this footprint. And that right-hand bar, instead of being small, can be much, much bigger by making advertising accessible. Therefore, more media growth, which helps the ecosystem of the advertising industry, the GDP growth for a country. And let's not forget the sort of social contribution. And just a kind of reminder, it's these guys. I mean, it feels like something of a sadness that all our expertise has only really been of benefit to big businesses. They've got all the rewards of digital marketing. And I think there's a certain satisfaction in helping the little guy and democratizing advertising for all. So it's not just the preserve of the fat cats.
I'm going to take over again and just explain in very few minutes and very few slides, how would ad agencies need to change, or what can ad agencies do? And I think, building on Guy's point, I think the first thing we need to do is add a service tier. There needs to be a self-service tier to ad agencies. Of course, we need the managed service tier to manage our big clients like a P&G and Nestle and Unilever, but we need a self-service tier for small businesses. And this is kind of the open source or easy access to agencies where we do share our expertise in a fully automated, simple manner to allow access for smaller businesses on tight budgets to get access to this. So solution one is a simple tier. Solution two is to kind of look at a different way of applying AI. I know that agencies are spending billions of dollars on AI. However, the way they're spending it currently is they're spending it to create 1,000 more ads for a Unilever, as opposed to spending it for creating one ad for 1,000 small clients. And if you do change that scale or that way of looking at things, creating an ad is creating an ad. Instead of creating so many for a big client, you can get so many more smaller clients on the advertising bandwagon. So number two would be changing the deployment of AI. And the third thing, and I think this comes as an interesting anecdote. So as part of our roadshow, Guy and I were speaking to a chief creative officer in VML YNR. And he was telling us how most of the agency work, he said 80 to 90% is on stuff that the creative are not interested in. It's on small social media posts or very basic things or adaptations or small visuals. And he tries to maintain the resources that he really likes by putting them on the big project. So the majority of the agency's talent works on the very few projects that they find interesting. And this is because we're always trying to raise the ceiling when it comes to advertising creativity. We're always looking for awards and Cannes and all of that. But I think what we need to look at is to raise the floor. This is probably the most important part. How can we make the advertising for small businesses or the cheap, simple, basic post for social media a little bit better quality? And how can we improve the majority of the work that we do versus just the very few that fit within this top 10, 20%? And this can be totally automated. And we do believe, I strongly believe, that an automated or an auto-generated ad will be much nicer than an ad done by a demotivated graphic designer or a demotivated creative who's just doing it to tick a box and get it out of the way. So here are some examples of fully automated generative ads that take into consideration everything that we know about the industry and advertising. So this is Root Hair. It's an eco-friendly hair salon where we wrote very simple lines and displayed their logo. This is something potentially a little bit more creative in terms of a generative image for Inktrap, which is a user experience company. Or this is a very clean and neat ad for an interior design company. But those ads don't really need a lot of creativity. They don't need the design team. They can be fully automated. They can be automated in a very simple way. And if automated, they become much faster, cheaper, and they would definitely raise the floor when it comes to creativity. Yes, they won't win in Cannes. They won't raise the ceiling. They won't get the attention of the biggest creative directors or judges, but they would definitely help in getting more small businesses to advertise. It would help in getting a lot more work done, and it would help us in the automation part. So I guess the three main things that agencies will need to do are, one, to be able to offer an additional tier, which is a self-service layer. Two is to position AI or to move AI from focusing on creating many ads for one client to creating less ads for more clients. And the third part is to focus on raising the floor as opposed to the ceiling when it comes to advertising creativity. And it is a race. Getting to the paid advertising for small businesses or getting all of those businesses to advertise is going to happen. And it is a race. And it's going to be a race between ad agencies and tech companies. And I think at this point, we need to look at who will get there first. Do we want the tech industry to take over? Do we want this to be like Amazon took over the high street, or like Uber took over the taxi business? Or do ad agencies still have a role to fight the big tech companies in terms of maintaining ownership of the advertising industry, or automating it in a way that is, you have an automated ad agency versus just an automated tech advertising solution? And this is where our experience and our knowledge to simplify and answer the questions of small businesses would come into play. So I think in summary of this presentation, there's a very big opportunity in terms of revenue for ad agencies that comes from small businesses. Ad agencies will need to automate or provide a self-service offering that incorporates all of their industry expertise in order to capitalize on this industry. And again, by automate, it's not creating ads automatically, it's inputting all of our industry knowledge into a system that would help tell you what ads you need and create them. And if we don't, or if the ad industry doesn't, we will lose out to the tech industry or bigger tech players, similar to the Amazon and Uber story. So again, I think we've done well. We've given this presentation there. You have around 25 minutes back. We'd love to have a discussion. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We'd love to know where you stand or what you think about this. We've spent the past 3 years talking about and working on this. We're happy to help if you want to reach out to us offline, but also we'd love to hear your thoughts on where you think this industry is going or how this fits in within your narrative.
Yeah, thanks very much, Fadi and Gar. That was really interesting take on the market. I'll kick it off, and hopefully people either stick a question in the chat or shout out if you do have a question. Guy, you talked a little bit about there's a limit to the amount of individualization or bespoke thinking that's required on some of these projects. How far up the ladder do you think that goes? How far do you think that the bigger clients or the higher spending clients on a similar boat where they don't need as much bespoke service as the agencies are offering? We often hear about agencies under a lot of pressure from a time point of view, from a revenue point of view, from a resource point of view, but they're going more and more bespoke rather than looking at the sort of technology solutions that you talk about for the smaller business. Where does that line fit, do you think?
I think that's tough to be precise on that. I'd go back to a point that all the evidence suggests people buy categories first and brands second. There are some exceptions to that, but mostly people are buying in a category and they will buy their favorite brand. And if that's not available, they'll just get the next one. And that's true everywhere. So that probably means that there's a much greater opportunity to provide more generic category-led solutions for a lot of clients and a lot of businesses. Simply creating visibility of a brand in a category can do an awful lot. And I wonder whether people are missing that as the first fundamental. And that could probably apply to a bigger set of businesses that even we're talking about here.
I would love to hear what other people think about that, because it sort of flies in the face a little bit of personalization. Which a lot of the people on this call are going to be from, digital marketing companies where they'll, I imagine, talk a lot about personalization as a solution and how to use data to do that. And I'm not sure that those two things square up. What does everyone else think?
But I'd like to just comment on that specifically. I mean, automation does not mean not personalization. We can still be extremely personalized using automation. It's just offering a bespoke service and over analyzing and over brainstorming and over discussing and over asking for every simple little thing is a way for potentially agencies to add more resource to a project and charge more money. But it's also a lot of a waste of time, and there's a lot of inefficiencies in that. And there is obviously a significant layer of this that can be automated. And where do you draw the line is a very difficult thing to assess, but it shouldn't, bespoke should not be equal to personalization.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying speed trumps depth?
In certain cases, like unless depth is really necessary, depth costs a lot of money, and you need to evaluate if it's worth to go into that depth for every single thing that you do. If you look at the 80-20 and how much return you get on little depth versus high depth, and you're able to make that decision, then by all means. And I'm definitely not proponing for or pushing for the fact that you don't need depth and you don't need the analysis and thinking, but I'm saying that you don't need it for every single task on every single element. All right. Well, thank you for your time, everyone. It was great having you. Thank you. Thank you, Ian, for hosting.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I think it's very thought-provoking, certainly. And I think that's, I agree with you that there is a huge opportunity to leverage, and it's about how do you find that right balance, exactly what we've just been talking about. How do you make sure that you're still delivering a high quality product that is relevant for that market, but that is relevant rather than just always increasing the amount of bespoke work that's done, which makes it expensive and confusing, perhaps. I think there's a huge opportunity to be done here. So thanks for your time. Really do appreciate it. I think it's been very thought-provoking. Thanks everyone who made the time to attend, and hopefully we see you on the next masterclass in 2 weeks' time.